Oh God, this is funny. Oh, more people came in.
And the chat is
Hello,
where?
everybody. We're getting started in like 1 minute.
Hi. Private chat?
On the right-hand side, it says social comments display here. Click them to showcase on stream. You hover over that and click show.
I don't
See where
see that.
captions and graphics is at the top and chat?
No, I don't see any of that. Maybe it's
Like
because
above my, oh, it's probably on my side. Yeah, go to the side of me. It says messages from audience will display here.
I don't see that. That's okay.
Okay.
I'll
All
figure
right.
it out later. Although if people say anything, I won't be able to see. All right, should we start?
Yeah, let's go.
All
Thank you,
right.
everybody, for coming to our unscheduled event.
George, I don't know if you guys heard, George was a really good sport. I called him freaking out, thinking that today was our weekly live stream. And
She
he's
gave
like,
me a heart attack.
and
I'm like, I don't have that on my calendar.
I almost convinced him.
I
And then,
know.
of course, he was right. I was wrong, and he's been kind enough to agree to jump on here because I emailed like 230 people telling them that we were going to be live. So we're very thankful that you guys showed up. Um, Today, we're going to talk about still move along the process of home purchasing process in,
Yep.
well, I speak specific to New York because that's what I'm most familiarized with. If anybody has any comments or wants to share anything about wherever else they are, that would be great. But I'm in New York, and so last week we talked about mortgages, different types of mortgages. George shared an enormous amount of information about different types of mortgages. And then again, we did it again, and we recorded it on a YouTube video that I uploaded to my channel. And I need to give it to George so he can do it on his. But you guys are welcome to reach out and let me know, or look at my link tree and you will find that video. It's the most recent one. So today we were going to continue to move along the process. Initially, the first step in the process is talk to your mortgage broker, right? In this case, George, so he can advise you on your timeline, on what it is that you want to do, so that way you know you're prepared and you don't stab yourself in the foot by doing things such as what? What? I'm sorry, George. I didn't give you any notice. What could somebody do that could mess them up in terms of being able to get a mortgage?
Prior to coming to me, they could buy a new car. They could open a new credit line, the credit cards, anything like that. You know, we need to check first to, hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I had a call come in, so it was interrupting me. So yeah, you know, we got to check those things out. They could have things on their credit report, so we want to get their ducks in a row, and you know, just see what's going on before they start looking for a house. This way, we could. So you definitely want to avoid doing anything that's going to affect your credit until you speak to a mortgage broker.
So step one is talk to George, our mortgage professional, so that you know what are the steps to take or things to do or not to do in order to be ready to get your mortgage. Step two is get your pre-qualification, which he will also help you with. In order to know what you're qualified for, what your budget is. Of course, it could be, you could kind of base that off of the rent that you pay in a way, because you probably have an idea of what your monthly expenses are. But remember that depending upon the type of property, your debt to income ratio, meaning the amount of money that you make a month or a year, divided by the amount of money that you spend on your credit card, your car payments, and your housing payments, gives you the debt to income ratio. And even though you can get a loan with like 40, sometimes 50% debt to income, co-ops will not allow you. Sometimes co-ops want to see more at 23 to 28% debt to income, depending on the co-op. But they tend to be a little bit more tricky, and they tend to want a little bit more generous of an allocation on what you need to pay for housing. So that's step number 2. And step number 3 is meet your real estate agent or find a real estate agent that you can trust. I advise, of course, I'm available, but I always advise people to ask somebody who they know who's gone through the process. And if they had a positive experience with a local real estate agent, you want to find somebody that you can ultimately trust, because it's a transaction with a lot of twists and turns. It's an emotional process, and you want to feel like you're being well taken care of. So, if you're not in a position where you know somebody that had a positive experience with somebody, yeah, you can find somebody else in different ways, but always make sure that you look at the people's reviews and look at their page, and pay attention to their response rate. How quickly do they answer their emails or their texts? Are they addressing your questions? Or are they just trying to sell you anything because they want to close a transaction? Are they really listening to your wants, as opposed to trying to just put makeup on whatever and let you think that whatever your concerns are not so important? So make sure that your wants and your needs, and I know this sounds really basic, but I think that oftentimes we may come across people that sort of minimize the concerns of the client, and that's not something that I would advise. Clearly, you want to make sure, because even though we all see everything through our own glasses, right, through our own eyes, and sometimes even though that may not be a concern for the real estate agent, they may just give you information as if they were you. And clearly, we all come to life with different perceptions. And so they need to address it as if they were completely unbiased towards anything. Of course, use their experience, their knowledge, and most importantly, data to support what they're saying, but not so much how they feel. This is your transaction, and how you feel and what you think should be most important. So when
Okay.
you're, go ahead. I'm sorry, George. Were you going to say
No,
anything?
I was just going to say, I don't know if many people think about this, but if you can get a realtor and a mortgage broker and an attorney who all are used to working with each other, it's going to make your process so much easier. Because there's a lot of bumps in the road when people aren't comfortable with each other and haven't worked with each other before. So you really want, like, me and Carolina work together, and, we have realtors and home inspectors, and it's just a lot easier when you get those referrals from one of us, because we're used to dealing with these people and we know who to refer you to and who's easy to work with, and who, it's just going to make your process a lot easier.
Especially because, they will know who's going to be able to perform at the timely manner that you want.
Mm-hmm.
Time is the killer of all deals. And if you
Yeah.
if you aren't able to get, I know George was talking to me a few days ago about an instance where everything needed to be done quickly.
Yeah.
It didn't matter that it was Friday or Saturday night. It's
Yeah.
like they need to be responsive enough to address the needs that are arising as the transaction is unfolding. So one thing that I did want to bring up is, we've talked about pre-qualification, talking to your mortgage broker, your pre-qualification, finding your agent. So that's the kind of like the section that we're covering today, is finding your agent / starting to look at listings / scheduling type of thing. So we already spoke about the importance of finding a real estate professional that you trust, them working together so they can communicate expediently with each other. And here's a tip: if you do happen to end up working with somebody where they don't know each other, I think always having an introductory email across them can help sort of break that ice, and can help them just start to communicate with each other in free form. Like, today I had to email a client's lawyer who, I wasn't sure where the ball was at this point of the game. So I backtracked to the lawyer, and then I backtracked to the managing agent, and then I backtracked to the listing agent, and I was able to find exactly what needed to be done to expedite the process. But it's something that all these professionals need to be linked to each other, and they need to be proactive enough to take action. So that's why always, I was working with a client too who said she read a book that advised her to never use the professionals that were recommended by the real estate agent. And I thought it was such a, she asked me, why do you think that book said that? I said, unfortunately, there are many people that have had very bad experiences with professionals in our industry, and therefore want to taint the world with their point of view and with their glasses. Unfortunately, clearly the whole point of finding somebody that you can trust is that you can trust their opinion and the people that they trust,
Yeah,
instead of, go
if
ahead.
you feel comfortable with your mortgage broker or your realtor and they're referring someone, it's probably going to be a good referral, because I don't want to work with someone who's not up to my standards either. I want to work with someone who's easy to work with, who gets things done. So I'm not going to refer somebody to one of my borrowers that is going to make me look bad, number one, and is going to make the whole process more difficult. So I would take that, what that book was about, the lady who wrote the book,
Yeah.
I would take that with a grain of salt. I don't believe that at all. If you don't feel comfortable with someone, then you're probably going to get the same thing with who they refer. But if you feel comfortable with somebody, typically you're going to get a pretty good referral.
Yeah. So that's one thing. Another thing is to, let the real estate broker do their job, in the sense that, oftentimes clearly there's a lot of excitement around looking for a new home. So you want to look and you want to browse and you do want to find what's out there, just so you can find out about prices and about everything else that you want, what the area is, what is the most type of inventory that's available in a particular area and whatnot. But in the end, every time you call that a number in Zillow, Trulia, any of these websites that list properties, anytime you call those numbers, what they do is they're trying to connect you with listing agents.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, buyer's agents.
Buyers agents.
Yeah. So, for example, in my case, I'm a buyer's agent mostly. I can also list, but I've been working mostly with buyers. A buyer does not have to pay me a penny to have me help them from the beginning to the end of the transaction. It's absolutely free to them. Whenever there's a listing, the seller already agrees on the percentage that they're going to pay the buyer's agent. So, instead of clicking that button and making a phone call every time and having somebody the other line think that you're going to be their client when you've already identified a realtor that you're comfortable with, or a real estate agent that you're comfortable with, instead of doing that, send all of the listings to your agent. And if you have questions about it, send those to your agent. If you want to schedule it, send them to your agent. If you anything, let them be your coordinator in terms of scheduling. Tell them when you're available, when you want to see, what you want to see, and let them do their job. You're never bothering them. This is their job. This is what they signed up for. So let them do that. You do go crazy with the research if you want to, but I would advise you, because otherwise it's going to get very confusing. I have had clients accidentally, because it wasn't quite clear to them, click on that button, and then when I go and try to schedule that viewing, because they clicked that button and told me they wanted to see it, then when I go and try to schedule it with the listing agent said something like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but somebody else has already scheduled that client."
Right.
So it just made things more difficult. The client had to email the listing agent, letting him know that he was working with me. So it's just going to be a lot easier. So that's one thing. Voice all of your preferences so that also the agent can sort of clearly screen the listings to you and send you things that are only relevant to you. And I think that's really like one of the most important things. And then when you go viewing, it's always good to ask your agent, what are the important questions to ask when I go view property? Because, hopefully your agent will be able to go with you most times. But if they aren't able to go, and then you find yourself going by yourself to view listings, you want to know what questions to ask. So, like, for example, assessments in the property that happens in buildings, condos, or co-ops, right? An assessment is basically a predetermined increase on either the common charges or the maintenance fees that occur as a result of an ongoing project. So, for example, in the building, they're going to upgrade the hallways, they're going to paint the hallways and replace the carpet. So to do that, they anticipate the cost, they anticipate how long it's going to take, and then they're going to increase the maintenance fees in a co-op or the common charges in a condo by a certain amount for a predetermined amount of time. So they say, for example, there is an assessment right now, it's an increase of say $50 on for just to use as an example because it's $50, it's easy, for let's say 3 years. So for the next 3 years, everybody's going to pay $50 extra. When it's in the case of a co-op, the increase usually is corresponding to the amount of shares. So I always think that's very important to know because sometimes the assessment will be listed in the common charges and the maintenance fees. Sometimes they won't be. So you could end up with a property, or I mean, you will find out at some point before, but where the common charges or maintenance fees may be listed at a certain amount, you may find out a little later rather than the amount is a little bit higher than you anticipated, at least for a few years. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't have any on here.
Okay. Okay. So that's one question that's important, the assessment. Another question that's important, depending upon what your needs are, is the pet policy. But that's important even if you don't have pets yourself, because when you turn around to sell it, or when you turn around to rent it, if it's a condo or if it's a co-op that allows renting, you want to know what is the pet policy, so that way, because clearly when you have a building that does not allow dogs or pets, for example, you are decreasing your pool of renters, especially after COVID. I think that most people got pets. So, or not most people, but a lot of people that didn't have pets before decided to get pets. You want to know what is the subleasing policy. Now, this goes back to the difference between condos and co-ops, right? In condos, you may be able to sublease with no restrictions. In co-ops, there are usually subleasing restrictions, such as they vary from unlimited restrictions, which there are some buildings like that, some co-ops like that, to some co-ops that say you can only rent after you live in the unit for 1 year. Then you can rent on 12-month lease for 2 years. Then you have to live in the building again for 1 year. Then you can rent for 2 again. So it depends. The subleasing policy in a co-op tends to change. And some co-ops even encourage the use or the living of the shareholders in the unit by increasing the maintenance fee by a lot when they sublease. So like I know a co-op down the street from me where they charge, I think it's 30% of the maintenance fee additional for the first year, and then it increases 30% after that for every year that you sublease to up to 300% of the maintenance fee.
I have a
So,
question.
yes.
So, are there different restrictions for someone who owns versus someone who leases?
In some
Like can some owners have pets, say, and if you're subleasing to someone, they can't have pets?
Yes, in some co-ops, there are actually those types of restrictions where usually only not leaseholders, shareholders will be able to have pets.
Okay.
So yeah. So, especially if you have pets, you want to be careful with that because you want to know. Like when I was renting apartments, I remember I had an instance where the rental was in a co-op and the girl had a cat, and, we all thought that it was a cat pet okay building. And then when it came down to it, they said, oh no, cats are only okay for shareholders.
Okay.
We were able to work it out, but these things do come up sometimes.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I always think that's important to know. Additional storage, especially in New York. Sometimes when you purchase in New York, some units come with additional storage. Sometimes they may tell you, yeah, we have additional storage, but it turns out that there's a waiting list of like 8 years, not 8 years, but maybe. And there may be an additional fee, right? And then there's also bike storage sometimes. And clearly parking. All of those extra items usually come with waiting. And then also ask, how are the utilities broken down? Because most often heat and hot water are included, right? But sometimes units will have independent heating systems that will not be part of the common charges or the maintenance fees. Sometimes they will have independent cooling systems or, just ACs that run off of the electricity. And typically, the occupant has to pay for the electric bill. So, um, yeah. Anybody has any questions?
No, this is good stuff.
Yeah, right. I think
A lot of information.
yeah, I think it's there are things that we get used to, I feel like as a realtor showing people around, but I think that when you're just getting familiarized with the types of property that you have or that you want and what you need, you become more and more aware of the importance of knowing what it is that you're getting into. I'm trying to think. Yeah. And so so let's say you viewed a listing, you sent it to your agent, he or she scheduled it, and they can't come with you for one reason or another. Make sure that you let the selling broker, the listing agent, know that you have a representing buyer's agent. Sometimes you can do that by asking your agent to give you a stack of their business cards, and that way every time you come in, you just give them the business card of your buyer's agent, or they usually have you sign in and you put your agent's name there. And the reason for that is, believe it or not, so I don't know if everybody's familiar with this in terms of the transaction, but typically there is agent representing the seller and there's an agent representing the buyer. The reason why when you call, you end up connected to a buyer's agent is because previously they didn't do that. And they would have people call the listing agent. Now, the listing agent would be taking in a client who is not represented by a buyer's agent. Many times the client, it was their first time home purchase and they didn't know what was what. They didn't know, they weren't familiarized with the process. If you've never done it before, it's a very convoluted process and there's a lot of moving parts to keep track on. So what they found was that, clearly the listing agent may provide all of the information that is required or that is requested by the client, but the listing agent's loyalty lays on the seller, not on the buyer. So even though and this is really the language that we use when we take the license, you are their customer, but you are not their client. So their loyalty lays with the client, with the seller. So when you're asking them, because you've interacted with them, they're the professional that you're interacting with them, you trust them, and you say, hey, what should I pay? Like, what do you think is a reasonable offer? Even though he's gonna advise you, he has the interest of the seller. So you most often want to have
Buyer's agent.
a buyer's agent that's
Yeah,
gonna help you.
that's really important. Like that was great information because a lot of people think maybe that, oh, this is the one person who's selling the house. She knows everything about the house, or he knows everything about the house or apartment, whatever. And they don't realize that, like you said, the loyalties are with the seller, not the person who's buying. So you really want to have a buyer's agent represent you properly so that you're getting the best deal and you're getting told everything, not just what's required to be told.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, it's for all types of reasons. And also because it doesn't cost you any money to have somebody help you through the whole process. Like you don't pay any additional fees to have a buyer's agent. So it's just I think it's a great system because it does help somebody that may not be so familiarized with the process be able to walk into a transaction. I mean, I can't tell you, I have actually a very dear friend who a bunch of years ago bought something and she walked into an open house unrepresented and they didn't allow her to bring, which is actually, that should never happen,
That's
that they didn't
illegal,
let
right?
her. Yeah, it's illegal for them to, if you go into an open house with an agent and then when you put the offer, you want to use an agent, you are able to. But they didn't let her. And at the time, she didn't know any better. This poor girl was a wreck for months because again, it's an emotional process. She didn't have any guidance. Years later, when I was representing her to sell her house and I did a comp report and I provided all of this information, she looked at me with like a deer in headlights look. Several times I was like, you have no idea. I had nobody to give me this information when I was buying. And unfortunately, she found out the hard way that she overpaid
Yeah.
because she had nobody to present her the data. So it's important. Anyway, I think we should cut it here.
Okay.
But
So thank you everybody for coming. We hope you learned something today. I actually did myself.
great.
And we'll see you next time.
So nice to see you guys. George, thank you so much for
You're
kindly
welcome.
agreeing to do this on the drop of a hat.
Of course.
And we'll see you later, guys. Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Okay.
I'm still on. I'm shutting down the Instagram. I'm
Oh
saving.
yeah.
I'm saving that so you could. I'm gonna post it for you.
Oh yeah. That's
That was
great.
good stuff, Carolina.
Yeah, that's
Like I
great.
never thought about that like that way.
See, sometimes you think and then you realize there's
Yeah.
actually more to what you know than what you think,
You know,
right?
very.
Because we're so used to this information.
Yeah. Oh, we could just say end stream, right, and stay on here.
Yeah.